Welcome back, this is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today we're going to be doing swirls and a tie-dye drip. As always, I'll make sure to put everything I use today into the description box below so that you guys can purchase those items if you would like to. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. Already prepped and primed my tumbler here. I just used a base color that I thought would go the best with all the colors I'm going to be using today, because I'm going to be using a few different colors, but I'm mainly using blues and purples, so I chose a teal background. I'm going to be using the epoxy method to adhere my glitter to the tumbler today. The reason why I'm using the epoxy method is because I'm using a few different glitters, and just with the way that we're laying it down, I just needed a little extra time to be able to apply it without my glue drying if I were to use Mod Podge or something like that. Now this is a big old 30-ounce skinny tumbler, and I mixed up 10 mLs of epoxy, and I'm going to use all 10 mLs of epoxy. Now that that's applied, the glitter I'm going to be using today, the first one is called Siren Song, then I will be using Ice, the next is called Twilight Spritz, and the very last one I'll be using is called Mary. And you can find all these glitters at sscglitters.com if you would like to. I'm going to go ahead and start out with my chunky glitter. I only have one chunky glitter I'm working with today. So when I do a swirl, I just try my best to start at one side of the tumbler and end at the opposite side of the tumbler. And when I have a handle, it makes it a lot easier because I can more visually see the opposite side of the tumbler that I'm trying to reach there. And as you see, I did sprinkle a little bit onto the bottom. That's going to help me with my line on the opposite side when I flip it over and try to figure out where I need to start my next swirl line. So I'm going to flip it, and then I take a look at the bottom, and I see I need to start it about right here. And then I just come back in the opposite direction and just bring my swirl back around just like that. And also, because I'm working with a handle, I need to make sure that I get the glitter in the areas that I need it to be. So I'll flip it up a little bit and just very, very gently sprinkle it onto the top, sprinkle it underneath if need be. It's just when working with chunky glitters and a handle, you really want to make sure that there's no glitter sticking up. It'll just make it easier for you when you go to apply those layers of epoxy over top, making sure those layers are nice and smooth. So just a very light sprinkling of that chunky glitter onto the handle will do. Now after these main chunky swirls are laid down, I'm just going to come through and make sure that they're about as even as possible. So I'll just take it and expand the lines out if I need to. I don't want to over expand it because I still need room for my other glitters I want to apply, but I just want to make sure that if you look at it straight on, that they look about as even as possible. All right, that looks good to me now. So we're going to move on to the next color. I'm going to use Ice, and I'm going to make sure that I take my glitter and I'm going to start it inside of the stripe, my chunky stripe there, and then I'm just going to drape it over into the epoxy. So that's going to be the start of us blending these two colors together. And I'm only going to put this color on one side of my stripe. Now, after I get this filled in, I'm just going to take a look at it and make sure that I like it. I like how that looks. I'm going to flip it, and again, just on one side of that stripe, again, continue on with that ice color, because I'm going to come through with the other color that we have and place that on the opposite side of my stripe. Now, Ice and Twilight Spritz are both opals, and they both reflect something different. So Ice obviously reflects like a tealy green blue color, while Twilight Spritz is going to reflect more of a lavender and pink color. So again, it'll kind of play with that Siren Song that is in the center. So again, on the opposite side of that chunky glitter swirl, I'm going to apply the Twilight Spritz in the same fashion I applied the Ice. I'm just going to start it kind of up into that chunky and let it drape over into the ice behind it. So now we are mixing two colors. We're going to be mixing it into the Siren Song, and we're also mixing it into the Ice. And of course, every time we come up to our handle, we just want to sprinkle the coordinating glitter onto it, making sure that it fades as well into the handle. But here you can see how it fades from pink to blue and back again. So I really like how that looks. I think it all blends really well together. Now, as just a very slight filler for my chunky area, I'm going to use a little bit of Mary, and I'm just going to sprinkle it straight down the center of that siren song. I really don't want it dipping too much into my opals that I have on each side, so I'm just very carefully just kind of filling in that center portion. Now, after we have our glitter applied, I'm going to go ahead and take my gloved hand. I'm going to remove any extra glitter from around the rim, and then I will come through and I will tap down my chunky glitters, especially around that handle, removing anything that just seems like it's going to be a bit of a nuisance, especially around the curves of that handle. If there's any kind of chunky glitter that's kind of sticking out, I just go ahead and remove it now and just kind of touch it up with a little bit of fine glitter, so that way you can't even see where that chunky was if you need to remove it. So now all I'm going to do is stick that off to the side and let that cure, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. After it has cured fully, we are going to use our chip brush and we are going to sweep away any extra glitter that didn't get adhered down to the epoxy. After we do that, we need to go ahead and seal our glitter down. This will just help out when we go to epoxy and make sure we don't accidentally get any little fish eyes or anything like that. So I'm going to use a liquid sealer today. Of course, you could use a liquid or a spray, whatever you feel most comfortable using. After my sealer has dried, then I will go ahead and apply a coat of epoxy over top of my raw glitter. I will put about 20 mLs of epoxy over top of it. You want it pretty smooth, so that way when we go to do our swirls, those have room to kind of spread out and do what they want to do without getting snagged on any glitter. So we did our glitter swirl. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to our epoxy swirl. Our tumbler is nice and cured and smooth from our coat of epoxy that we had put over top. And now we are going to make these beautiful, beautiful swirls. I'm going to be using 3 different types of colors today, so that's why I have 3 different cups here. Of course, if you need to, you can expand your cups or decrease the amount of cups you're using depending on how many colors you intend on using. Into each one of these containers, I'm going to apply about 5 mLs of epoxy. That's about all I need. You don't really need too much for these swirls. I'm going to go ahead and place those off to the side for now, because now I'm going to need to put a coating of epoxy over top of my tumbler. I'm going to use about 20 to 30 mLs of epoxy. I'm going to go ahead and place that onto my turner right after I get that applied. I'm going to hit it up really good with my torch. And then if you are using a fast setting epoxy, you need to move right into the next steps. Right as you do this, you don't want to wait. If you're using a regular set epoxy, you need to go ahead and let your epoxy sit for about 10-15 minutes. If you're using a regular set epoxy and you move right into making your stripes, the stripes will disperse and bloom out a little too much, I found. So letting the epoxy sit and warm and get thick will really help to make sure that you can kind of control the thickness of those stripes, so that way you can have thinner stripes, thicker stripes if you want to. Whereas fast set, really, I mean, you only have about 10-ish, 15 minutes to work with it. So that's why you move right into it as soon as you apply it. All right, moving on. To color the epoxy, I'm going to be using Pop of Color in Neon Pink. I'll also be using their Neon Purple. And when adding colorants to your epoxy, you just want to do a little bit at a time until you get the color you would like. You don't want to accidentally add too much. Now into my last cup, I'm going to be adding some mica powder called Betty, and this is kind of like a pearl white mica. So before I get my swirl done, I'm just going to check the consistency and make sure I'm okay with that. I like how that is dripping. So now I'm going to go ahead and rotate my tumbler in the direction I need it to go. So I need it to go this way so I can easily apply my stripes. I am going to get my string of epoxy going off of my popsicle stick, and then I am just going to very gently drag it across the areas I need it to be in. So I am mainly focusing on the outskirts of the chunky. Of course, I'm going to go into the chunky a little bit as well, but I kind of want it a little bit more into the fine glitter. And just like with anything else, I'm only going to do a few of these stripes at a time, because I'd rather add more than try to take away. So that's all you have to keep in mind when you're doing this. So I'm just going to do a little bit of these pink stripes. I'll come through with my stick and I'll just kind of evenly distribute it, make sure there's not anything kind of built up, as you can see here and there. I mean, we are going to come through and even out even more, but this just kind of helps it get started with that kind of swirl motion we want it to be in. Then I will take my next color and I'm just going to do the same thing where I get it dripping off my stick in a nice even flow. And then I'm just going to layer that pretty much right next to my pink. Now moving on to my last color, I waited to do the white pearl last because this is the one where I wanted to add the most of, and I'm pretty much just going to come in here and I'm going to apply this all over the place. In the chunky, into the fine, next to all the colors. This is pretty much going to be like my main focal color here, with the other colors just kind of popping through. And once I have enough white laid down, then I'll come back through and add a bit more of the pink and a bit more of the purple. After I do that, taking my gloved finger, I will come through and just kind of evenly smooth everything out. I will make sure to use one finger for the colors and then another finger for the white area so I don't accidentally overblend everything together. Now once I have that evened out, I am going to take my torch and I'm going to come through and get, not only pop the bubbles that are in this, but this will also start to shift the swirls just ever so slightly. It's not going to be a huge shift, but it will start to shift. You don't want to overshift it. If it starts to drag off to each side, making those straight lines, you need to stop. So at the top, it kind of did that. And at the bottom, it did that. It started to do it, but you just want it to shift ever so slightly, just like when we do our beach waves, and then you stop. You kind of let it just do its thing. So as we've been sitting here, our epoxy is continuing to get warmer and warmer as we go, and it's becoming even more stringier and thicker. And this is when we can really get in there and do those super thin lines. So I'm going to get my lines going, and I'm going to add a few more of my white lines, pink lines, and purple lines in this super thin manner. And I'm not going to hit it up anymore with my torch because I want to keep these super thin lines. Let's say you're having an issue. It seems like your lines are raised above the epoxy rather than kind of settling down into it. Then I would take my torch and just kind of help it settle down a little bit more, but I don't want it to move too much after this. All right, so after I get my last little line applied here, I am just going to let that rotate and let that cure, and then we're ready to move on to our next step. So we are going to move on to doing our tie-dye drips. Now, I almost forgot to press record, but I remembered, thankfully. So I'm using Tulip Puffy paints to be able to create these tie-dye drips. And I'm just going to be using a bunch of different colors. All these colors came in one kit, so I'm just using every single color. And I'm just going to layer these at the very top of my tumbler. You just want a nice thick line as I'm showing you guys, and you want it to kind of overlap over each other. So I don't know how many colors you want to use, but I really love the outcome of using just pretty much all the colors I can. So even after I get done doing that, I come through and I'll layer them completely around the top again. I will just kind of switch out. I'll put pink on top of the blue, but you just want to layer it. You want to have fun. That's what this is all about. So to swirl it even more together, I'm going to take this dotting tool that is meant for nails, and I'm going to come through and just really swirl that together. Once it's nicely swirled, you are going to make sure that you have it on a nice flat surface and going straight up and down. You want to give it a few good taps, and you just want to kind of twirl it and see how your drips are going. But you just want to continue on this motion until you get it the way that you would like. And if there's any areas like that right there, you just easily wipe it away. That's all you got to do. Now, after I get that all tapped out the way that I would like, I'm just going to come through with my tool once more, and I'll kind of help out in little areas that I just didn't like the way it looked. I'll kind of help smooth them out a little bit. I will also use it to pop any bubbles that might be in the puffy paint as well. If there's an area you feel like just needs a little bit more, feel free to add a bit more of the puffy paint, give it a few taps, and fix that area that you need fixed. Moving on, while it is still wet, I'm going to go ahead and remove any of that extraness around the edge. Now you can obviously leave it just like this without adding glitter to it, but I wanted to add glitter. You want an opal white, so you want to be able to see through it. And I have two here. This one's Agenda it has a golden undertone, and Starlight has a pinkish green. And that's the one I ended up using because I felt like it went more with the color scheme that I have going on. Now we're going to take our glitter and we are going to load up our drips with our coordinating glitter. So the reason why I'm doing the decal next is because if I laid down my glitter and then I had the decal was already put on there, the glitter would get all stuck down into my decal. So that's why I try not to do the decal first before I do my drip, because I don't want to have to try to get out all the little bits of glitter from the decal. Now, after you get your glitter down, you want to go ahead and set this off to the side. These drips aren't going to move. You don't want to tap it, then they could move, but you just want to set it off to the side. It will dry. I let it sit overnight just to really make sure that it is nice and dry before I go to sweep all the glitter off. So I let it sit overnight, and then I came through with my chip brush and I really got in all those nooks and crannies and made sure to get out any extra glitter that just didn't get adhered down to our puffy paints. Now we can go ahead and apply our decals. So the quote I'm using I got right off of Creative Fabrica. I went ahead and did an offset around the quote, and for the top layer I'm using this really pretty mermaid opal vinyl, and then I'm just stacking that on top of regular white vinyl. I'll go ahead and get that burnish down into the area that I would like it laid. I'm going to go ahead and add its final last finishing coats of epoxy, and she is good to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.